Over to Abhay Patnaik. Abhay.
Yes, good evening. Yes, good evening, all of you.
Yeah.
Uh, I think we should start the session. I was given the task to introduce Dr. Rashmi Ranjan Das, who is the assistant professor
नहीं.
in the High
Abhay, let me introduce Madam Abha Singh. Rather, this is
Yeah,
just like showing torch to the sun. In Raipur and in all over Chhattisgarh in India, who does not know Dr. Abha Singh? Madam Abha Singh was the Dean of and Medical College of Raipur. She is Vice Chancellor of Ayush University of Chhattisgarh, and she was the President of Raipur OBGYN Society. She was the ex HOD and principal today, and she is the Vice President of SAPSI, the newly formed Society of Vaginal Surgeons of India, and she has numerous publications to her credit, and she is a national corresponding editor of Jogi, and she is a peer reviewer of many journal, awarded many prize. Particularly, she is awarded the Health Icon by Times of India Group, Best Paper in Gynec Oncology, and recipient of the prestigious Chief Minister's Award on Meritorious Service by Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh. Madam Abha Singh is a very kind-hearted and down-to-earth person, very well-mannered and extremely knowledgeable. Madam Abha, I am introducing you in your own place, but this is for the benefit of entire delegates across the country, and some are also joining us from abroad. So, Madam Abha Singh, the session is yours, and thank you for being here, and please deliberate your lecture. Madam Abha Singh.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for your very, very kind introduction. And if I'm allowed, then I will straightway go to the lecture.
yes,
And this is a very interesting, I thought this is a very interesting lecture on prolapse, which is a very, very common thing seen in our practice. And I just felt that this is very good because uh, most of the time one wonders. When I was a student, I used to wonder that why we remove the uterus in a case of prolapse. So I begin my lecture with the kind permission of the chairpersons. Am I audible?
Yes, madam, you are perfectly audible.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
So I go ahead. So my topic today is prolapse and is hysterectomy necessary for its management? Now, just a word about the history, that the concept of uterine preservation, surgery for this pelvic organ prolapse is nothing new, but there is a resurgence in the interest over recent years. Many women now want an option, that if there is an option, they would like to choose. And it was Donald who first described the Manchester repair as an alternative to vaginal hysterectomy. And in 1930, Victor Boni highlighted the passive role of uterus in the uterovaginal prolapse. And subsequently, the surgeons have developed techniques for the uterine preservations using different routes like vaginal, abdominal, or laparoscopic route. So a brief word about what is pelvic organ prolapse. Now, this prolapse is defined as the descent of either the anterior or the posterior vaginal wall, the apex of the vagina, or the vault or the cuff after hysterectomy. Another way of classifying it is as no prolapse. That means all the points here are above the hymen. Then gradually the most distal prolapse. So everything is according to the hymen. If it comes below that, so accordingly the different degrees are there. So we'll not go into the detail. A POP Q classification is a very important thing, where there are 6 defined points in the vagina, and they are AA and BA on the anterior vaginal wall, AP and BP on the posterior vaginal wall, C and D indicate the cervix and the vault. And if the hysterectomy has been done, this point will be absent. Along with this, there are three additional measurements that are taken. One is the genital hiatus, the length of the genital hiatus. Another is the uh, perineal body, the length of the perineal body. And the third one is the transvaginal length, the whole length of the vagina. So this is very, very important classification. And this is then written on a grid where the above top line will indicate the anterior and the lowest line will indicate the posterior. Let us come to the prevalence of POP. Almost 50% of all women who are above 50 years, in a lifetime, they will have a prevalence of 30 to 50% of prolapse. And women with a normal life expectancy will have an 11 to 12% chance of undergoing at least one operation for prolapse or incontinence. Also, the reoperation rate is around 29% by the age of 79 years. And you know the etiology very well. The aging, the pregnancy, delivery, previous pelvic surgery. These are some of the high risk factors which the woman undergoes throughout her lifetime. In addition to it, there may be increased intra-abdominal pressure such as chronic pulmonary disease, constipation, obesity, and heavy manual labor. Above all these factors join together to weaken the pelvic floor muscles and ligaments which support the very important structures of bladder, urethra, uterus, and rectum. Now, the management includes non-surgical as well as surgical management. And most pelvic surgeons today favor the surgical treatment. However, we have to have a choice of treatment, and the conservative management can be applied to a patient who has a low POP quantification stage, those who decline surgery, and sometimes elderly patients with multiple comorbidities. So what are these non-surgical management? One is conservative. It includes two things: behavioral modification and pelvic floor muscle exercise. And behavioral modification includes reduction of high-risk factors that provoke chronic increases in abdominal pressure, such as constipation, obesity, chronic cough. And pelvic floor muscle exercises, they were introduced for the very first time by Kegel, and it improves the muscle strength. The contractions which are taught to the patient, they should be sustained for at least 2 to 10 seconds, and gradually they can increase that, so they can sustain those contractions longer, then performed regularly 2 to 3 sessions per day, and each session should consist of at least 10 sustained contractions within a span of 20 minutes. But this PFME is suitable only for mild to moderate POP, but not for a high grade POP, which is grade 3 and 4. So what is the evidence for this conservative line of management? There is an international consensus that pelvic floor muscle training, it should be the first line treatment for stress urinary incontinence and pelvic organ prolapse. So this was a result of a RCT done in 2019. And what did the Cochrane reviews publish in 2011? It concluded that there is currently evidence that pelvic floor muscle exercise has a very positive effect on the symptoms as well as the severity of the prolapse. The performance of 6 months of treatment, which is supervised by a physical therapist, showed benefits in anatomical terms and improvement of symptoms. Then next non-surgical treatment is the mechanical devices, which we are all very familiar with. The use of pessary. Now, this is basically for a patient with a medical comorbidity or a refusal of surgery, or like in these COVID times where we want to postpone cold surgery for some time. So the relative contraindications are a wide vaginal outlet, a short vagina, desire for surgery, and an inability to manage the pessary by the patient herself. Either she's too old or she's too incapable of doing it herself. The pessaries which are used are of two categories. One category includes a pessary with a supportive function, such as a ring pessary, which is mainly given for stage 1 and 2 of POP. The other category includes pessary of space filling type, such as cube. So this is a cube pessary which gets fitted, and it can be maintained in position through this, and this is connected to a vacuum. Pressure is created here, and it will retain itself. And the another type of pessary which is used in stage 3-4 is inflato ball pet. Again, this is a ball which is collapsible, and this is fitted into the vagina, and this is then it is blown into a balloon, and it can retain itself. When we talk of acceptance and complications, what the studies say is that the pessaries were fitted successfully in a study to about 74% women, and amongst these 62 women who used it for more than 1 month, 66% of the women were still using it after 12 months. And what are the complications associated with the pessary? The vaginal erosion, pelvic pain, vaginal discharge, severe stress urinary incontinence, sometimes de novo voiding difficulty in cases of ill-fitting or displaced, and sometimes de novo defecation difficulty. Let's see the Cochrane review on these pessaries. Currently, there is no evidence from the RCTs upon which to base the treatment of women with POP through the use of mechanical pessaries. There is also no consensus on the use of different types of device, the different indications, nor the pattern of replacement, nor there is any follow-up care. So there is an urgent need for RCTs in this field. Then surgical management. Now these are important management. The surgery they fall into 3 categories. One is the restorative surgery, which uses the patient's endogenous or the native supportive tissue. Second is the compensatory surgery, where we use the synthetic mesh or a biological graft material. And the third is the obliterative surgery, which partially or totally closes the vagina. Now let us go to the restorative surgery, which includes the cystocele, rectocele, and enterocele repairs. Now, before we go into the details, we have to talk about Delancey support, because whatever surgery is done in compensatory field, it's always repair of the facial tissues. So what are the different levels? Here you can see the level 1 of support of Delancey. This is almost oriented vertically. You can see the fibers almost running vertically. And so this supports the upper vagina. The level 2 support is more horizontal. You can see this is more horizontal. And it is attaching the middle vagina. And distally, the level 3 support, it fuses directly into the structures. Like this is fusing directly into the rectum. And another important word which you will be hearing very often in this thing is endopelvic fascia. Now, this is such a variable tissue in different individuals that this variability may lead to its inherent weakness and inconsistency in reconstructive surgery. That means in some we can use this to correct a defect, in some it is too weak to be repaired. So in fact, the fresh strips of this endopelvic fascia has been shown to shorten 15 to 20% of its length. So thus these tissues are not only supportive, but they are contractile too. But histologically speaking, this tissue is unlike abdominal wall fascia or the facial covering of other muscles, because they lack the organization of the facial coverings of the skeletal muscles. Cystocele repair. Now cystocele, we know the definition. So whenever there is cystocele, it can be either a paravaginal defect, which can also be called as lateral or displacement, or a midline defect, which is central or distension, or a transverse defect, which is also known as apical, when the pubocervical fascia separates from the vaginal cuff or the uterosacral ligaments, or there may exist a combination of all these defects. So here you can see the lateral cystocele which is caused by the detachment of pubocervical fascia from the and the pubourethral ligaments from the arcus tendinous fasciae pelvis, ATFP, arcus tendinous. So this is the arcus tendinous, this white line, and so this is the defect here. So this is called as lateral cystocele. And so the purpose of operation will be correction of this relaxed, detached endocervical fascia around these structure. Then similarly, this repair can be done transvaginally. And again, this is if the endopelvic fascia is good enough, it can be closed by certain sutures, maybe 5 to 7 interrupted, non-absorbable sutures placed at 1 centimeter intervals on both sides. And after the sutures are tied, one can do cystoscopy, or rather I would say cystoscopy should be done to perform to identify the efflux from the urethral orifices and the bladder injury. And the success rates of the cystocele repair or this are from 82 to 98%. Then there can be a retropubic paravaginal repair where the detached cervical pubocervical fascia is sutured with the arcus tendinous with an interval of 1 centimeter by non-absorbable sutures from the ischial spine to the pubic bone. And the success rate again is very good, 85 to 98%. Recently, all this has been done through the laparoscopic routes. And what are the complications of this retropubic repair? There may be intraoperative hemorrhage. There may be lower extremity neuropathy. There might be vaginal abscess and urethral obstruction. Then we talk of central cystocele. So this is the central cystocele in the center. So this is failure of support by the pubocervical fascia in the midline of the anterior vaginal wall. So the aim is to approximate it together in the center, and that is the repair of the anterior or the central cystocele. Then it can be done transvaginally, which we are all doing. Just to tell you that it was Kelly who developed the technique in 1930, and many modifications have been there of this technique. But what is important is the cure rate of this colporrhaphy has been reported to be around 70 to 97%, because the cure can be defined in different ways. So there is no criteria that cure rate is defined in this particular way. So all the studies quote different rates. And a very recent report from New England Journal of Medicine, a transvaginal mesh repair was done and compared, and they showed a higher cure rate of 60.8% from the traditional anterior colporrhaphy group, which used the native tissue. That was only 34.5%. So although the mesh repair showed a higher bladder perforation rate, but it showed a good cure rate. So the procedure is not recommended for lateral defects or stress urinary incompetence. Then a combination of central and lateral defects can coexist. And again, you need to combine those techniques. And for women who have apparent or occult stress urinary incontinence in association with advanced prolapse, placement of a mid-urethral mesh sling or Bursch procedure may result in a higher continence rate than the suburethral plication or a paravaginal repair alone. Then to the rectocele, the posterior wall prolapse, that is defined as any descent of posterior vaginal wall, so that a midline point on the posterior vaginal wall 3 centimeters above the level of hymen, or any posterior point which is proximal to this point is less than 3 centimeters above the plane of the hymen. So you can see there is a rectocele. And posterior vaginal wall relaxation is caused by site-specific tearing of rectovaginal fascia, which can result in herniation of rectum as well as small intestine in 40% of even asymptomatic Paris women. How it is classified? Rectocele can be classified in 2 ways. One is a high, mid, and low. High is the result of defect in the cardinal or uterosacral ligament complex, Mid rectocele is caused by weakening or detachment from the archinus tendinous. Separation of perineal body at the level of rectovaginal fascia leads to a lower or low rectocele. Another classification of rectocele can be, because the defect can be anywhere. It can be a lateral defect, it can be a central defect, it can be a defect at the apex and it is called as apical defect, or it can be very low down, that is the perineal defect. So traditional posterior colporrhaphy, you know, it involves plication of pubococcygeus muscles. These are the pubococcygeus muscles, this and this. So plication of pubococcygeal muscles across the rectum as well as the perineal body for the repair of posterior vaginal wall. The complications can be severe postoperative pain, dyspareunia, or a vaginal stricture. And to prevent all these complications, a very simple thing is, when you repair the opening, it should always accommodate 2 to 3 finger breadth, because post-operative, there will be shrinkage due to menopause. Again, there will be more shrinkage. So we have to see where we are leaving at least this much breadth. Then a defect specific posterior repair. So wherever the defect is, we repair that. And it has been found that the success rate of site specific repair is very, very variable, ranging from about 60 to 100%. And there is a de novo constipation rate, 3 to 4%.
Thank you.
And there is a de novo dyspareunia rate from 0 to 8%. Prolapse of the apical segment can be sometimes a cause, and it is defined as any descent of vaginal cuff scar or hysterectomy, or cervix below a point which is 2 centimeters shorter than the total vaginal length above the plane of the hymen. So transvaginal routes as well as abdominal approaches can be used to repair this. Transvaginal approaches, you all know, are the sacrospinal ligament fixation. And I will not go into the detail of this, but the contraindication of this is a sacrospinal, is a short vagina. The principle of the procedure is to fix the vaginal vault to the sacrospinous ligament. This is the sacrospinous ligament, and you are fixing the vaginal vault to this ligament. However, sometimes a bilateral fixation is performed in patients who have a recurrent vault prolapse and with the goal of restoring the vaginal axis, because it is so important to restore the vaginal axis. Then uterosacral vaginal vault suspension. Now this can be again done vaginally or abdominally, and it is requiring a fixation of both lateral sides of vaginal wall to uterosacral ligament. Here you can see that this is the uterosacral ligament and this is the rectum piercing this. So this can be done bilaterally, but because on the side of uterosacral we are having the ureter running. So after surgery, the cystoscopy must be performed. Another thing is ileococcygeal suspension. Now this fixation of vaginal vault to the fascia of ileococcygeus muscle bilaterally. So where is it? This is to be done in cases where the uterosacral ligament is not identified or it is very, very insufficient in its length. And the advantage, of course, of this method is decreasing the neurovascular injury or post-operative cystocele. And this does not shorten the vaginal length. So it can be used as in cases where the vagina is short. And whereas when we talked of sacrospinous suspension, it shortens the vagina. So this is ileococcygeus suspension, suspending, tying it to the ileococcygeus muscle. So this is the ileococcygeus suspension. Then another is posterior intravaginal slingoplasty. Here there can be 3 levels of repair. One level which will aim to insert a tape in the position of uterosacrals, can be done by use of a tunneler. Second is to approximate the rectovaginal fascia towards the midline, and the third will include repairing, because it is low down, it will include the repairing of perineal body. Then there is abdominal sacrocolpopexy. The basic concept is supporting the vagina with a suspensory bridge. So this you can see here, connected to the anterior ligament of the sacrum. longitudinal ligament of the sacrum. So this is indicated in patients where failed previous vaginal repair is there, in patients with isolated apical prolapse or antrocele, and in younger women with an active sexual life. And this has been considered as a gold standard for vault prolapse. So vault is fixed to the anterior longitudinal ligament. There is less paravaginal scarring and denervation and fixation of entire vaginal apical area by a permanent mesh to the stable ligament. So this maintains a maximal vaginal length and a near normal axis. And if antrocele is present, the pouch of Douglas could be closed with Halban or Moskowitz procedure. Coming to the antrocele, this is the prolapse of POD with or without the bowel, and it has been seen in 75% of cases of vault prolapse. The surgery is obliteration, simple obliteration of the pouch of Douglas. So what is the evidence of this reparative or restorative surgery? Using the current composite definition of success, the native repair, that means the person's own tissues, this is effective for relieving the vaginal bulge symptoms and reducing prolapse within the vagina. The success rate of POP surgery varies tremendously depending on the definition of treatments of success that is used. So it varies so much so that it varies from 19.2% to 97.2%. Thus, today it is very difficult to compare the outcomes because of variation among the patients, the surgical techniques, and the definitions of success. Then the same kind of surgery can be done with a robotic POP repair. The principle is the same. The advantages are the cosmetic aspects, which include reduced pain, shorter recovery time, lower morbidity, convenience of surgery. This has led surgeons to perform more and more cases laparoscopically. And this is an example of a robotic sacrocolpopexy. It is a next generation, I think, standard treatment modality for total POP. Then next type of surgery is compensatory surgery. Now, restorative surgery is associated with high failure rate. And this can be corrected with the help of synthetic meshes or biological grafts. The advantage is this is a durable repair. Another advantage is it is a less invasive procedure. There is standardization of technique. Not only that, but the standardization of mesh as well as the ability of repairing multiple compartments through the vaginal approach. So most of the support this. The evidence of this.
रिपोर्ट तो ठीक है और आपका हेल्थ ये जो है ना
Hello,
टेस्ट निकालने का
please be unmute yourself. Other than Dr. Abha Singh, nobody should unmute. Please.
So what is the evidence of this? The Cochrane review notes that in anterior compartment, the biological graft material or synthetic mesh, they are better than using no graft. And the synthetic mesh is better than a biological graft. So if we compare the two type of mesh and graft, then synthetic is much better. And the mesh is much better than graft, but mesh is much better in terms of the objective failure of anterior compartment. The indications for mesh repair will be the patients who are at risk for native tissue failure and in whom the benefit of mesh use can outweigh the risks. Also, these group will include the patients who complain of recurrent prolapse. Once you have done repair, they will again come. Higher stage prolapse, which is POP stage 3 or 4. They may be having collagen disorders or inherent weakness of their collagen tissues and a chronic stress to the pelvic floor. And recently, the FDA has issued a safety communication pertaining to the mesh used for prolapse, but not for a sling. The American Urological Association has issued a position statement noting that extensive data support the use of mesh slings for stress urinary incontinence. With respect to transvaginal mesh for prolapse repair, the association noted that many of them have successfully used mesh, although there are inherent complications associated with its use in comparison to the native tissue, and that a thorough informed consent as well as discussion between the surgeon and the patient should occur prior to choosing this route. Then obliterative surgery, colpoclysis has to be done on a woman who is having certain comorbidities, who doesn't require any sexual activity and who's too old to be taken for surgery. Anyway, so this used to be a favorite thing in the past, but the procedure has some advantages such as shorter operation time, ease and safety of employing regional or local anesthesia, and minimizing uncommon complication of hemorrhage or nerve injury. Coming to the vaginal hysterectomy, is it necessary? Now, this has been very long been a standard approach for the management of uterine prolapse. And first, it was successfully planned case. The credit goes to Longenbach as long as 1813. It remains today a safe and readily available surgical solution to uterine prolapse. And various techniques and their modifications have been described. But what is the current debate? Now, it is argued that the uterus itself is healthy and the underlying pathophysiology is only a connective tissue deficiency, whether congenital or acquired through childbirth or aging. And that uterine prolapse is merely a symptom, but it is not a disease. And the debate continues. They say that the vaginal hysterectomy fails to address the underlying deficiency in connective tissue. So the cause has been told, the etiology is the deficiency of the tissue, but you remove the uterus. So where is the treatment for the deficiency? So there will be a high relative recurrence rate of 10 to 40%. And recurrence can manifest with vaginal vault eversion, or more commonly, it may be as recurrent antrocele or a cystocele. The cystocele commonly arises because of loss of apical or vaginal support. And until apical support is established, a cystocele will recur after surgery. And hysterectomy, they say that they remove a healthy organ, and this may play a role in a woman's individual and sexual identity. And the argument continues. The other school of thought says that vaginal hysterectomy has been a part of core gynecological training for many, many decades, and recently a part of popular vaginal surgery advanced training skill module. Most gynecologists are therefore trained and very, very comfortable in doing the procedures with good outcomes. So what does the evidence say about all this? There is evidence that the procedure is associated with a high patient satisfaction rates, which are not significantly different from uterine preservation. Some uterine preservation procedures have also been associated with high rates of recurrent anterior wall prolapse. So what should be the goal of management? Should we remove or should we not? I think more than that, we should believe in 4 things. One is quality of satisfaction. Another is relief of symptoms and preventing a newer symptom, preventing complication, and curing the anatomical changes. So management of uterine prolapse is currently heavily influenced by patient and the surgeon preferences. The traditional approach to the prolapse is vaginal hysterectomy. However, this does not address the underlying deficiency, and therefore the recurrence is common if the patient lives longer. The uterine preservation surgery is increasing its popularity both with surgeons and patients, and currently there is little evidence today to show superior outcome to hysterectomy. So there are many surgical approaches, multiple ways to quantify the prolapse are used. I think with POP classification, if everybody follows, there will be a good uniformity. There is a lack of standardized definition of cure, and the data on the prolapse surgery outcomes are therefore heterogeneous. And the goal is to return the pelvic organs to their organic anatomic positions. So thank you so much for listening to me on this prolapse, whether it is necessary or not in cases of whether hysterectomy is necessary for cases of management of prolapse uterus.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a wonderful talk. And I request Hara sir to kindly say a few words.
Yeah, madam, it was quite exhaustive, and you covered almost all the points, and it was very nice, starting from anterior defect, mid defect, and posterior defect. All the things you highlighted and the typical surgery attributed to each deficiency you have already mentioned. I think, Dr. Manoj, we will keep the question answer session. I was checking that from the chat we have a few questions. I think after the presentation of Dr. Rasmi Ranjan Das, we can take the question for both the speakers before going to the panel. Is that okay?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
I think Dr. Abhay Patnaik will now introduce Dr. Rasmi Ranjan Das to go ahead with the presentation.